Good afternoon, students. Okay, today I am going to teach you about how to find the position of the element in the periodic table. After that, I will explain you periodic properties and the variation along the period and the group in the chapter called periodic table. Okay, in the chapter called periodic table, as you have learned in class 9 also, there are 7 periods and 18 groups. Okay, 7 periods from period 1 to period 7 and 18 groups from group 1 to group 18. Now, how to determine the group of the elements? We do so with the help of outermost electron. So do remember, if the number of outermost electron is 1, outermost electron is 1, then it belongs to group 1, the element belongs to group 1. If outermost electron is 2, it belongs to group 2. If the outermost electron is 3, it belongs to group 13. If the outermost electron is 4, it belongs to group 14. Outermost electron 5, it belongs to group 15. Outermost electron 6, it belongs to group 16. Outermost electron 7, it belongs to group 17. Outermost electron 8, it belongs to group 18. And this grouping nomenclature is done according to Moseley. You can even do with the help of Mendeleev's classification, but in case of Mendeleev, it has been given in Roman number and it has been subdivided into two groups, A and B, in which A is in your syllabus, B is not, and that is a little bit confusing. So therefore, you better go with Moseley's periodic table. So I have written the group name according to Moseley's periodic table. Now, how to identify the position of the particular element in the periodic table? Let us see that. Number of electron in the outermost shell indicates group in the periodic table, and number of shell in the electronic configuration indicates period. Okay. Now I am going to teach you how to find the position of the elements in the periodic table. Whenever they say position, means you have to determine period and the group. So to determine the position of the elements in the periodic table, I have given you some examples here, like sodium, calcium, Ca, ammonium, neon. Their atomic number will be provided to you. Okay, so atomic number of sodium is 11 and that of calcium is 20, ammonium is 13 and neon is 10. So 11 means the configuration will be 281, 20 means 2, 8, 8, 2, 13 means 2, 8, 3, and your 10 means 2, 8. Now see out here, how many electron is there in the outermost shell? 1. Okay, in case of sodium, therefore it belongs to group 1. Outermost electron 1, group 1. If you see in calcium case, the outermost electron is 2, so it belongs to group 2. In case of aluminum, the outermost electron is 3. Most of them write group 3, but that's wrong. Okay, you have to write group 13. And see, in this case, the outermost electron is 8, so it belongs to group 18. So if the outermost electron is 1, you say group 1. 2, you say group 2, but 3 onwards you have to say 13, 14, like that. Okay, so the outermost electron is 1, group 1, outermost electron is 2, so group 2, outermost electron 3, we write 13, and outermost electron is 8, so group 18. Now let us see how to find the periods. Count the number of shell, first cell, second cell, third cell. So there are 3 cells, so it belongs to third period. First cell, second cell, third cell, fourth cell, so it belongs to fourth period. First cell, second cell, third cell, so there are 3 cells, it belongs to third period. First cell, second cell, there are only 2 shells, so it belongs to second period. So this is how we determine the position of the element in the periodic table. Therefore, sodium belongs to third period, group 1. Calcium belongs to fourth period, group 2. Aluminum belongs to period 3, group 13, and neon belongs to group period 2, group 18. This is how we find the position of the elements. Now let us see one application based question regarding this. So if you see this question, an element X belongs to third period and it has 7 electrons in the valence shell. Valence shell means outermost shell. Now state the following. So these are the 7 things you have to determine from this question. So number 1, you have to determine the electronic configuration. Now let us see how to do. It belongs to which period? It has been said third period. So there will be 3 cells. So first cell, second cell, third cell. I placed blank out there because this means first cell, second cell, and third cell. Okay. Now 3 cells because of third period. Now it has 7 electron in the valence shell, means outermost shell. So make 7 out here. 7 electron in the outermost shell. Now in the first 2 you will put 2 and 8. So that will give you the electronic configuration of element X. Now, you have to determine the type of element. As I have said you in my previous classes, if the element has 1, 2, 3 electron in the outermost shell, they are metal. In 4, 5, 6, 7 is non-metal. So since it has 7 electron in the outermost shell, therefore it is a non-metal. Now we have to determine the valency. Non-metal always gain electron, because I always compare it with bad person, so they always snatch electron from others to become octet, to become happy. So it can gain how many electron to become octet? Already it has 7, so it can gain 1 electron, so its valency is 1. Gaining is bad quality, so the sign will be minus. So overall valency of chlorine X will be minus 1. Okay. Now, will it lose or gain electrons? Question is saying, will it lose or gain electrons now? Non-metal always gain electrons. Bad person, they always gain electrons. So non-metal will always gain electron. Now, will it suffer oxidation or reduction? I have said you the word OL in my previous class. So loss of electron means oxidation in OL part. So the opposite, gain of electron, becomes reduction. So will X suffer oxidation or reduction then? Gain of electron means reduction. And those who suffer reduction, opposite, are oxidizing agent. So will it act as oxidizing agent or reducing agent? The one who suffer reduction act as which agent? Oxidizing agent. If it was oxidation, here will be reducing agent. Now, so its oxidation or reduction reaction. Now we came to know that it is going to suffer what? Reduction. Therefore, we have to show its reduction reaction. Okay, and now let us see how to show the reduction reaction. Here is your element X. I am about to show the reduction reaction because it is suffering reduction. And you know that X has 7 electron in the outermost shell, and it is a non-metal. Therefore, it gains 1 electron to become octet. So gaining is shown by plus sign. And how many it's gaining? 1 what? Electron. Electron charge is what? Minus. So X has 7 electron in the outermost, so therefore it is a non-metal, so it gains 1 electron. So plus indicates gain 1 electron. As a result, it will convert into X minus 1. Why minus 1? Because it is gaining 1 electron, so it will develop minus 1 charge, and that is actually the valency of the element. And this is the reduction reaction of the element X. Now to confirm it, whether my reaction is right or wrong, you can compare. No charge, put 0 on the head, as I said in my last class. Now compare. 0 to minus 1 is increase or decrease? Decrease. And decrease in the number means reduction. Increase means oxidation in the OL part, as I said in my previous class. So decrease means reduction. So this is how we are going to learn about the position of elements in the periodic table. And this is one application based question of it along with yesterday's part. Okay. Now, we will see the periodic properties, in which 1, 2 I have already explained you before in hand. Okay, these are the 6 property which is in your syllabus. Actually, there are many other properties, but it is in the syllabus of class 11 science. For the time being, in class 10 syllabus, you have to learn about the 6 property. Okay, atomic size or an atomic radii. Singular we call radius, in plural we call radii, so we put double I there. Metallic character, non-metallic character, electronegativity, ionization potential, and the last one is your electron affinity. Okay, so these are the 6 property you need to learn about. So size, I have already explained you in my previous classes, even the metallic characters and all. Now I'm going to help explain this with the help of a picture to you. Now the heading for this is variation of periodic property along the period and group we are going to see. Now, to understand this variation, it's better you make this picture, which is very easy to make. If you see how I made it, from here the size is decreasing, atomic size of the element is decreasing, left to right, that is called period, and top to bottom the atomic size of the element is increasing. Top to bottom means group. So to remember, left to right means period and top to bottom means group. Okay, left to right the size is decreasing, top to bottom the size is what? Increasing. This is period, this is what? Group. And if you see this picture, I remember one Bollywood actor called Mr. Shah Rukh Khan. Okay, so I don't know how to give his signature pose, but similar to that you can make this one. Okay, as I am trying to do it, but I may be wrong. Okay, so left to right the size will what? Decrease. Okay, and top to bottom the size will increase. Okay, Just remember, left to right, the size will what? Decrease, and top to bottom, the size will what? Increase. So remember that way. So it is easy to remember this diagram now, picture for you. Now let us see with the help of this picture how we can classify this, how we can determine this 6 property, what happens to them when we go to the period and a group. That is, left to right is period, top to bottom is group. Atomic size or radii in period, left to right, group, top to bottom, what happens? From the picture you can see that the size of the atom is decreasing left to right, that is in period. So in period, atomic size will decrease. And top to bottom, the size is increasing, therefore in group, size will increase. So I repeat again, atomic size will decrease left to right, and top to bottom, the atomic size will what? Increase. And if the size decreases, the radius will also decrease. The radius will also decrease. And if the size will increase, the radius will also increase. So whether it's atomic size or atomic radii, both will decrease in a period, you can see from the picture, and both will increase in a group. Now we go to the metallic character. As I have said you, metals are good persons, so they have big heart. Okay, if you see here, the heart size is decreasing left to right. Okay, heart size is decreasing, so the good person character is decreasing, so the metallic character will also decrease. Whereas top to bottom in a group, if you see, the size of the atom is increasing, the heart of the good person is increasing, so metallic character will also increase. Now we go to the number 3 part, that is called non-metallic character. Okay, non-metallic character is the character of a bad person, we say. So if you see here, the size is decreasing means non-metallic character is increasing, because smaller the size, more the non-metal, we say. So size is decreasing means metallic character will increase, because smaller the size, more the metallic character. In a period, size will metallic character will increase. Whereas in group, if you see, the size is increasing, as a result the quality of a good person is increasing and the bad person is decreasing, therefore in a group non-metallic character will decrease. Now we go to the electronegativity. Negativity is the character of a bad person, so you can consider negativity is the character of a bad person, means is the character of a non-metal. So in a period, since non-metallic character is increasing, so negativity will also increase. In a group, non-metallic character is decreasing, therefore electronegativity will also decrease. Now we go to the next, that is called ionization potential. It is the amount of energy required to remove the electron from the outermost shell of a neutral isolated atom. I explained you in my last class. So if you see out here, between these two, if you see, the force of attraction between nucleus and outermost electron is increasing, because the size is becoming small. So as the your size decreases, force of attraction will increase. So as a result, more and more energy will be required to remove electron. Therefore, ionization potential will also increase, because the energy is increasing. And in a group, if you see, the size is increasing, so the force of attraction between the nucleus and outermost electron is decreasing, whereby less energy will be required to remove electron. As a result, ionization potential will decrease in a group. Electron affinity, as I said to you yesterday, affinity means what? Affection, love. So who loves electron? Non-metal, bad person they love. Okay, electron. Affinity means love towards the electron. Metal, they usually give electron, so they don't have any affinity for electrons, so their affinity is less. I said you in my last class. Whereas non-metal, they have high affinity for electrons, because they want to become octet. So as a result, do remember, as the non-metallic character increases left to right in a period, electron affinity also increases. But down the group, negativity decreases, non-metallic character decreases, therefore the affinity for electron will also decrease. So do remember, electron affinity increases in a period, and in a group it decreases. Now I have seen in many students' case, they get confused, because sometimes it is increasing, decreasing. So there are many properties, there are 6 properties in which some in period they increase, some they decrease. Similarly in group also, some are increasing, some are decreasing. So the students are getting, I came to know that students get confused in this. Therefore I have given a small trick for them. Whether it will work for you all or not, just check it. If it works, well and good. So the trick is this one, okay. Papu is very famous in television ad. If you have seen the Cadbury ad of Dairy Milk, isn't it? Similarly in movie also. So I made Papu famous out here in my chemistry also now. So I call it by this name, Papu Ni Papu Mad. Okay, Papu Ni and Papu Mad. This P stands for Papu, Ni. P means again Papu, Mad. So what is the meaning of this? Let us see now. Papuni, Papumat. This P stands for period, non-metallic character for N, electronegativity E, electron affinity E, ionization potential I. All of this increases. So in a period, non-metallic character, electronegativity, electron affinity, ionization potential all increases. Opposite, in group it will decrease then. Similarly, in a period, metallic character, atomic size and radii will decrease. That means in group it will increase. So it will become just a reciprocal. Many of you mug this up, but please don't do so. What you have to do is, remember Papuni, Papumat, you remember about the period, make it opposite, it becomes for the group. Now let us see how this is going to help you in the objective question of ICSE board exams. This is the multiple choice question which has come in your ICSE board exams. Okay, ionization potential in a group. Will it increase, will it decrease, remain same, or none of this? You have to choose the correct answer. Now forget about everything, just see the word I here. Ionization potential will increase, decrease, or what? Okay. So I, does it come under Papuni or Papumat? So I comes under Papuni. So if it comes under Papuni, in period it increase. But they have asked you about what? Group. So in group it will decrease. So no need to learn in this form. If you remember these two, you can manage it by yourself. Okay. Now let us go with another question again. Metallic character in a group. Again 4 options you have. Will it increase or decrease? We don't know. So let us see again. See the letter M. Metallic character in a group. 4 options you have. So M comes under Papuni or Papumat, because when you pronounce Papuni, M does not come. In Papumat, M comes. So in a period, metallic character will decrease. In a period, metallic character will decrease. But I have asked you in group. So if in a period, metallic character will decrease, in group it should increase. So this is how you can solve the objective questions of periodic table topic. Okay. Okay, now I'm going to teach you how to arrange these elements, okay, in increasing or decreasing order of the property which I have discussed earlier. So the few examples are out here. So I've given you 3 examples how to arrange, and this comes everywhere, mostly in your ICSE board exams. Arrange the following elements in increasing order of ionization potential, the question is saying. Okay. Now, first of all, you have to see this element. Are these the element of a period or a group? Where you have seen in the periodic table. Okay. Actually, these all are the elements of group 17. So first arrange them in the way they are in the periodic table. As you know, they are the elements of group 17. So the first element in that group is fluorine. After that comes is your what? Chlorine, then bromine, then iodine. It is given in jumble of form. I have arranged them in sequence the way they are in the periodic table. Now, as I given you that picture earlier, remember that left to right the size will decrease, and top to bottom the size will increase. So as you go from top to bottom, the size will increase. Done. Now they have said you to arrange them in increasing order of which potential? Ionization potential. Now again remember the concept of that Papuni, Papumat which I gave. Again, if you see here, the word is what? I. So it comes under Papuni. That means in period it will increase. That means in group it will decrease. In group it will decrease. So in group it will decrease means fluorine will have the highest value of ionization potential, decrease, so iodine will have the lowest value. Because in group it will decrease. So fluorine will have highest value and iodine will have the lowest value. Now which order I have, the question has said you to do in is increasing order. So increasing means lowest to highest. So who is the lowest out there? Who has the lowest ionization potential then? Iodine. More than that, who has? Bromine. More than that, chlorine. More than that, fluorine. So this is the increasing order of ionization potential of these elements. Okay, you cannot make this directly. So this is your rough work. From that rough work you get the hint, then you make the answer. Okay, and this is for 1 marks. Now I'm going to the second question. Again check properly where this element belongs in the periodic table. They belong to group 1 in the periodic table. So arrange them in sequence wise. So first comes is group 1. They belong to group 1 in the periodic table. The first element which comes here is lithium, then sodium, then potassium, then rubidium, then cesium. And since they are the element of a group, as we move from top to bottom, the size will increase in a group. I have already said you. Now they have said metallic character. M, metallic character. It comes under Papumat. So that means in a period, metallic character will decrease. That means in a group, it will increase. Increase. So increase means this will have the lowest, this will have the highest. Because in a group it will increase, so this will have increase means it will have lowest, it will have highest. Now you need to arrange them in decreasing order of the metallic character. Decreasing means highest to lowest. So who has the highest value then? Cesium. Less than that, rubidium. Less than that, potassium. Less than that, sodium. Less than that is lithium. So this is the decreasing order of metallic character for this element, and this is the answer for again 1 marks, but you cannot do it directly. Take the help of the rough work. Okay. Now before I go with the number 3 question, I like to say many students, especially in the hill area, they don't know the sign of increasing and decreasing order, which I have seen. And what they do smartly is they put comma in between. They put simply comma in between. And it is very difficult for an examiner to isolate now whether it's a decreasing order or increasing order. So I request you, it is a basic of class 5 and 6, do learn how to show increasing and decreasing order. In increasing order, in this symbol, the peak will be in the left hand side and the gap will be in the right hand side. Okay, whereas in decreasing order in this sign, the gap will be in the left hand side and the peak will be in the right hand side. So please do learn these symbols. This is increasing order, this is decreasing order. Now we go to the last part, and this is the one. After completing this, I am going to finish this chapter for you. Most of the basic portions I have taught you, follow up in your textbook after that. Okay, again analyze these elements nicely. Now tell me where they belong in the periodic table. You have to be familiar with the periodic table. Okay, it's better if you keep one periodic table in your bedroom and have a look every day. So now this element, if you see, they belong to period, and it comes in sequence like this. First is carbon, then nitrogen, then oxygen, then fluorine. They are the elements of a period. Okay, and in a period the size will what? Decrease. In a group the size will increase, in a period the size will decrease. Now they have said about atomic size A. So does it come under PUPU-NI or PUPU-MAD? You have to analyze that first. So it comes under PUPU-MAD because A means atomic size. So in a period atomic size will decrease. PUPU-MAD, in a period atomic size will decrease. Decrease means this will have the highest and this will have the lowest. Now let us arrange. Increasing order means lowest to highest. Lowest to highest. So who has the lowest? Fluorine. More than that, oxygen. More than that, nitrogen. More than that, carbon. So carbon has the highest atomic size. Now the symbol. Increasing order, decreasing order. As I have given you some idea, now you can make a rough, shall we go with this sign or shall we go with this? So this is the symbol for increasing order and this is the symbol for decreasing. Okay, so right now it's increasing, so we go with this symbol and we write in between. So this is again the answer for 1 marks. Like this question comes numerous in your board exams. Please students do learn. So I have completed one topic with you, that is from periodic table. If you have any doubts, let me know. Okay, or through KTV or phone number, whatever it is possible, you can contact me also for this. And I'm going to come with a new chapter in my next episode. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, student. Today we'll continue with the meiosis part. Yesterday I have taught you what is meiosis, where does it take place, how does it take place. The different stages of meiosis are not there in the syllabus. So today we are going to do significance of meiosis. Why meiosis takes place? What is the advantage of meiosis? So number 1 point is that it restores the chromosome number in the somatic cell. So you have already come across that in meiosis, the 46th number of chromosome, that is the somatic cell, germinal epithelium, will get reduced to 23. Now when it is getting reduced to 23, that means the somatic cell contains 46, when it is getting reduced to 23, half the number of chromosome that happens in meiosis, then how it is going to make it into 46? Then one thing you have to keep it in your mind, that the reproductive cells, that is the ova plus the sperm, which is 23, this is also 23. When they fuse together, then zygote gets formed. So when zygote is getting formed, then what gets formed? 46 number of chromosome is restored. So the meiosis, in meiosis, when the chromosome number is getting reduced to half, again, due to the fusion of the two reproductive cells, again it is restoring the chromosome number. That is the somatic cell, the growth cells of our body, the chromosome number is maintained. Next part, it reduces the chromosome number to half. The second point or the advantage of meiosis is that the chromosome number is getting reduced to half, that is 23. It maintains the stability of species. You know that every living organism, human being, are known by 46 number of chromosome. Now what will happen? If this meiosis will not take place, then what is going to happen? If somatic cell and somatic cells will fuse, 46 plus 46, then it will become 92, and 92 will become some other organism. So thereby what is happening out here? When due to meiosis, when the reproductive cells are getting reduced to half, then what is happening out here? It is maintaining the stability of the species. That means the chromosome number is getting restored, and by 46 number of chromosome, we are known as human being. Another part, it brings about variation in the offspring by crossing over. That is, in the meiosis, what it brings about? It brings about variation. Why it brings about variation? Yesterday, when we were discussing about meiosis, you have come across that a cell, a germinum epithelium cells, when they get reduced to half, n number that is 23, when the chromosome number is getting reduced to half. After that, again, how many cells will form? 4 cells are getting formed. So from one cell you are getting 4 cells in meiosis. All these 4 cells will be different from one another. That means in a family, if you see, if a parent have 4 daughters, all the 4 daughters are of their parents, but all of them are dissimilar in their morphological features. Their appearance will be different. This is called as variation. There is a difference in the living organism. There is a difference among the family members. There is a difference between the brother and the sister also. And that is due to what? Crossing over. We'll be learning details about how the crossing over takes place. Next part. It plays a very important role in evolution. Now, when I talk about evolution, how does it going to take up a very interesting phenomenon about the evolution is that when organisms at the past and organisms right now, when you see, then our forefathers and all, morphologically they were different, and today you see is different. So day by day, when generation by generation, you will find a difference in the genetical makeup. This genetical makeup, like for one example, I'll tell you, like long time back, our ancestor had a tail. Now you don't have a tail. So these are all the genetic variation, and it is this variation brought in the living organism, or you call it as evolution. That means as the passage of time takes place, then morphologically human beings also gets modified, and this you call it as evolution. So these are the benefit of meiosis. Now let's come to the another part, that is difference between mitosis and meiosis. So how you are going to extract the point between the mitosis and the meiosis, what you are going to write in the difference. So most of the children, what you all do, like whenever the difference between will come, you simply write the definition of mitosis and meiosis. Okay, don't do that. What you have to do, when I say differentiate between, then there should be a compatible point. When I say compatible point, then in one column, like suppose if I say thick, the other side should be thin. If I say this is dark, then the other side should be light. So this way you have to make a compatible point. Like say for example, here I am writing the structure. the other point, the other part, if I'm writing function, then that is not a compatible point. So here the point should be compatible in difference between. So first point is that between mitosis, where does mitosis takes place? Mitosis takes place in somatic cell. The other point is that it occurs in reproductive cell. Next point, it occurs throughout the life. That means somatic cells division is going on throughout the life. Skin cell, you will come across that it more or less it get replenished, and 50 times the new cells get formed in a human being. Similarly, you will come across that this meiosis, the formation of the reproductive cells, happens only during the reproductive active age. Reproductive active age, that is after puberty. Okay, so when I say after puberty, it includes after 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 onwards. That is the reproductive age during which this reproductive organ become functionally active, and during that time these organs, the reproductive organ, that is the testis, ovary, and if it is in the plant, when we talk about the reproductive organ, it includes the anther, the ovary, which produces pollen grain and ovule. Similarly, when we talk about in terms of animal, then you have to understand the reproductive active age means that from 10, 11, 12, 13 onwards, when the reproductive organ starts functioning in nature. The third point, for the mitosis takes place for the growth and development. That means growth, the growth in a living organism is due to mitotic division, and due to that there is a certain morphological changes in the body, you call it as development. But meiosis takes place for what formation? Gamete formation. So when I say gamete formation, it is the formation of the reproductive cell. Fourth point, here in mitosis, two daughter cells which are genetically similar to the parent cell. That means a cell is a somatic cell is there, growth cell is there. When the cell is dividing, then you will find that both of them are similar to their parent. If this is 46, this is also 46, and this is also 46. If I take a rectangular cell, this cell is dividing into a rectangular cell, into a rectangular cell. Both of them are similar in their appearance. This is mitotic division. So here two daughter cells which are genetically similar to them. This is the parent and this is the daughter cell. But here four daughter cells which are genetically different from parent cell. So take for example here, this is the germinal epithelium cell. From here, the chromosome number gets reduced to half, 23. Again, this will go under mitotic division. Here 23, here 23, this also 23. So thereby, in meiotic division, how many cells you are getting? You are getting 4 number of cells. So 4 daughter cells which are genetically different from parent cell. All these 4 cells are different from the parent cell. Last point, diploid number of chromosome in each number of daughter cell. That means you see this is the daughter cells. So here 2n. That means when I say 2n, then you have to understand 2 into 23. That is 46. So this is diploid number, you call it. Half the number of chromosome comes from the mother, half of the chromosome comes from the father. So thereby it is a diploid number. Whereas in meiosis, haploid number of chromosome in each daughter cell. You see that all the cells have half the number of chromosome. So if it is a sperm, all the sperm will have half the number of chromosome. If it is a ova, then all the cells will have half the number of chromosome. So these are some of the compatible point, 4 point I have given, and which is important from ICSE point of view. If you write this compatible point, you are going to score a good mark. Okay, student, we have already finished cell division, and now regarding crossing over, how does crossing over takes place? In order to understand, there are few terminology which needs to be clear. So first of all, you see in my previous class also I have discussed about it. If you have not gone through it, okay, you have to go through this chromatin fiber where it is present. Then you have to understand, first of all, we have the cell. Inside the cell there is a nucleus. Inside the nucleus there is a chromosome. Chromosomes are made up of nucleosomes. Nucleosomes are made up of, that means nucleosomes are made up of histones, that is 60%. This spherical ball-like structure that you see, it is the spherical protein that makes up the histones. 40% is DNA. That means histones plus DNA makes up nucleosomes. Nucleosomes together makes up chromosome. Chromosome is inside the nucleus. And where is nucleus found? Nucleus is found inside the cell. Now, come to the next part. Now, when you look inside the cell, you will find a thin fiber. This thin fiber, you call it as chromatin fiber. Now, this chromatin fiber, more or less when you look at telephone wire, it is a very supercoiled structure. This supercoiled structure wire that you see inside the nucleus is nothing but it is a chromatin fiber. Now, this chromatin fiber, when you pull it out, like in a wool, when you are pulling out the string, what you will find? You will find they are highly coiled. This coiled structure that you observe, those are the nucleosomes. Now, these nucleosomes, now here you see, if you see it properly, you will find a round ball-like structure. This ball-like structure, what I have written out here? Histones. That means this ball-like structure, spherical ball, that is a spherical protein. 8 spherical protein makes up histones. That means if I take out one ball, in one ball, the coil structure, that is the string, this string is DNA. Now, this string is unwind, or if you wind it, then you will come across that this together makes up the chromosomes. This together makes up the chromosome. That means all the wire wounded, the thread-like structure wound over the histones makes up chromosome. So chromosome is a condensed structure. If it is a thin structure, then it is a chromatin. If it is a condensed structure, then you call it as chromosome. Now, come to the another part. When I talk about DNA, then DNA, what is DNA made up of? Then the components of DNA are sugar, phosphate. Sugar and phosphate. Sugar and phosphate, you call it as backbone of DNA. That means this strand that you see, the filament-like structure you see, these two structure, this backbone of this DNA is made up of sugar and phosphate. And in between you see A and T. A and T, C and G. These are nitrogenous bases. When I say nitrogenous bases, A stands for adenine, T stands for thymine, C stands for cytosine, and G stands for guanine. These are the 4 nitrogenous bases in which in between the 2 strands they remain. They get connected by a weak hydrogen bond. That means between adenine and thymine there is a hydrogen bond. Now, this is the structure of DNA. That means the DNA and the histones makes up nucleosomes. Nucleosomes makes up chromosome. And what is chromosome? It is the hereditary character of a living organism. Like, say for example, when I talk about this cell when it is dividing, it is exactly dividing like the parent. That character is carried by chromosome. So it is the hereditary unit of a cell. Now, come to the another part. If I pull out one of these string, the string may be long enough. Okay, it may be long enough. So in one of the string-like structure, or I call it as strand, S-T-R-A-N-D, strand, a part of the protein, you call it as gene. That means what is gene? It is the physical and functional unit of DNA. Physical and functional unit of DNA. That means a very specialized character, or very special proteins are present that is determined by gene. So here you see that a part of DNA is there. This is gene. Here a part of DNA is there. In the part of DNA there is a small part of the protein is there. A specialized protein may be there. This you call it as gene. So gene is the functional and physical unit of DNA. Now come to the next part. Here you see I have written mitotic chromosome. That means this chromosome, whenever it undergoes mitosis, then you will come across that this chromosome, when it is undergoing mitosis, then there is a peculiar changes. So here what will happen? One one of these one of this chromosome structure will form a replica. That means when I say replica, replica means duplicate copy, Xerox copy you can say. So this strand will make a duplicate copy. Here you see I have made a dotted line out here. This is the replica, or it undergoes duplication. After it goes under duplication, both of them are similar in nature. Both of them are identical in nature. This identical nature of this chromatin structure, you call it as sister chromatid. What do you call it? You call it as sister chromatid. Now, this sister chromatid, you see that in the meiosis part, what they will go? They will go under crossing over. So here, which part of this chromatid structure will go under crossing over? You need to understand. So first of all, what is sister chromatid? A replica formed from the chromatin structure is only called as sister chromatid. Now, when after replication, any of the structure that gets formed, you use the term called as chromatid. Since they are identical in nature, you call it as sister chromatid. Now, let's try to understand what is crossing over. Now, in crossing over, you see that in a cell, there are 46 number of chromosome. 46 number of chromosome, they appear in pair. And when it appears in pair, that means 23 and 23, 46. Now, this 23 is coming from where? Then you see that this 23 is coming from the father. This 23 is coming from the mother. That means one I will call it as maternal, the other one I will call it as paternal. So this is 23 and this is 23. Now what will happen? The maternal part, first of all, let's take the maternal part. When it will form a replica, that means when it will form replica, when it is undergoing mitotic division. During that time, a duplicate copy gets formed. This one is identical to this one. The shaded part is identical to this one. I call it as which chromatid? Sister chromatid. Here I have labeled it as A. Okay. Now you come to the next part. That means the other part of the chromosome. Okay, 23. So this is paternal part. It will form a replica. Replica when it will form? When it is undergoing mitotic division. During that time, again, when the replica is formed, you call it a sister chromatid. Now, between the sister chromatid, when the sister chromatid they come together, okay, they come together, then you call it as homologous chromosome. That means if this sister chromatid of A and sister chromatid of B, when they come closer to each other, then this chromatid you call it as non-sister chromatid. What do you call it? Non-sister chromatid. Now, when the non-sister chromatid, they are identical in nature, but only thing is that their allele will be different. So what is allele? We'll be discussing in the genetics part of it. Okay, but here you have to understand the sister chromatid and the sister chromatid of A and B, they are called as non-sister chromatid. This non-sister chromatid, when they come closer to each other, the phenomenon is called as synapsis. Okay, you call it as synapsis. Synapsis means when the homologous chromosome, non-sister chromatid, identical in nature. First of all, identical in nature, homologous chromosome. Sister chromatid of A and sister chromatid of B. When this A and B, when they come closer to each other, the phenomenon is called as synapsis. Very often the definition comes at what is synapsis. So your definition will be that when the homologous chromosome comes side by side, they are coming side by side, then it is synapsis. Now, this sister chromatid will overlap with one another. So that happens in meiosis. Okay, so these phenomena are going on in meiosis. So what do you call it? They overlapped with one another. So here what happened? Crossing over took place. And the technical term of crossing over, you call it as chiasma or chiasmata. Okay, anything, chiasma or chiasmata. And due to this crossing over, it brings genetic variation in the living organism. That is why we brothers and sisters are all different from one another. If four brothers are there, you will find that although the parents will be the same, but they all of them will resemble like that of a parents. The four daughters are there, five daughters are there. All the five daughters will be different from one another in morphological structure, in the physical appearance. This is all the genetical variation that is brought by meiosis, and in meiosis it is due to respect due to crossing over. Thank you. Here I have already finished the cell division chapter. Hope you have understood, and we'll continue with the genetics part in the next session. Thank you so much.
My dear students, our today's topic of the same chapter is center of gravity. Center of gravity. Which we very often read as CG. So this is our topic for the day. What is center of gravity? So in simple words we say it is a point on the body where the entire weight of the body is supposed to act. Suppose we are having a body is made up of many particles, and all the particles exert weight, means force of gravity is there on each particles. Where we will consider the entire particle's weight is supposed to be situated, that point is called center of gravity. So the simple idea of finding center of gravity is to find a point in the body where the body is in rotational equilibrium due to its own weight. Let us take the body over here. How to find the center? Where is the weight of the entire body acting, or where is the entire weight of this body situated? Let us find out that. So to find out, we have a simple method. We will try to balance the body on a knife edge, on a sharp edge like this, on finger like this way. We will keep it horizontal. The point where about which the body is in horizontal position or the body is in rotational equilibrium, that point we can call as center of gravity. Say, I find that point is somewhere where it is body is getting balanced itself. We are not using any weight, we are not placing any weights on the body, and the body gets balanced itself. That point is known as center of gravity. So we can say it is the point on the body about which the body remains in rotational equilibrium due to its own weight. Now the question arises, where is the position of the definition of center of gravity? We can say like this also, it is the point about which a body remains in rotational equilibrium due to its own weight. Position of CG depends on position of CG depends on mass distribution of the particles, mass distribution of the particles constituting the body, constituting the body. That means center of gravity depends upon the shape and size of the body and the structure. What kind of structure, what type of shape, or what is the size of the body depends on that. I remember one year in ICC they had given this question: if a body is deformed or if the shape of the body is changed, will the position of CG of the body change? The answer is yes, because by doing so the mass distribution of the particles in the body changes, and so as the position of CG. So position of CG will change when a body is deformed or when the shape of the body is changed.
So now another important question on CG is that can the CG of a body lie outside the body? Is it possible that the body's CG is lying outside it? Answer is yes, that is also possible. That happens, we have some examples there. Suppose we have a ring. If we are having a ring like this, center of gravity will be here, outside the body in the space. Similarly, if we are having a hollow cylinder, any kind of hollow body, CG will be situated outside the body. So that is very much possible. So that also is the question of 1 year ICC. I don't remember the year, but that had come in ICC. Now let us take a case. This may be a probable question for ICC. This hasn't come as yet, but they may give a question like this. Suppose there is a glass sphere which is exactly half filled with mercury, and half filled with water. This is mercury and this is water, and now the question or there may be, where will be the CG of the this ball be situated? Will that be situated exactly at the center, or above the center, or below the center in mercury? So where should it be situated? So what should be the answer for this? The CG will be situated on the heavier side, on the denser side. We know the fact that when the weight is more or when the force is more, the distance should be less. That means center of gravity will be shifted towards that side, towards the denser side, towards the where the particles are more dense, more concentrated. So in this case, the CG will be somewhere below the center of the sphere. That means somewhere in the mercury side. It will be somewhere here. It will be in the inside mercury somewhere. It will be at the junction of the two liquids. It will be towards the mercury side. So that way you can find out. So this can be a question. They may ask you the reason why it is situated inside the mercury, because the mercury is denser, mercury is more particle, the weight of the mercury particles are more, so it will be shifted towards that side. So that could be the answer. Same way they may give another question like this. We are having a composite block, two blocks of equal sizes are joined together. One may be iron, this is maybe iron block, this may be a wooden block of equal size, wooden block of equal size are joined together. Now the question is, where is the CG of the composite block be situated? Will it be situated exactly at the junction, or inside iron, or inside the wood? So the answer would be, it will be inside iron somewhere, because the iron is denser. So center of gravity position depends upon where the more mass is dense or where more mass is concentrated. It will be towards that side. So hope you understood this concept. Now we have some regular figures, geometrical figures, and they have a particular point of CG. So you got to learn about that. So I will be making a table. That means CG for some regular bodies. Here we write type of body, here position of CG. The table is given in the book as well, so you can learn from there also, or you can just copy this table. First one is, if a body is in the form of a rod, where will the CG of this rod be situated? We write here midpoint of the rod, midpoint of the rod. Second case, suppose we are having a body in the form of a circular disc, this will be at the center of the disc, If we are having a body in the form of a ring, as I mentioned already and shown before, that in case of a ring, so it is situated at the center of the ring, If we are having a body in the form of a cylinder, either hollow or solid cylinder, the CG will be situated at the midpoint of the axis of cylinder. If we are having a body in the form of a sphere, either hollow or solid, so it will be situated at the center of the sphere, center of the sphere. If we are having a body in the form of a triangular lamina, lamina means only a sheet of paper, triangular sheet of paper and all, or like triangular leaf. So here it is situated at the point of intersection of the medians, which we can call centroid of the triangle, If we are having a body in the form of a cone, then here you have to see the case. There are two cases. We may have a solid cone, we may have a hollow. In case of solid cone, it is situated at a height h by 4 from the base of the cone, and in case of hollow, at a height h by 3 the base of the cone, where h is equal to vertical height of the cone. Vertical height of the cone. So sometimes they may only ask you to mention where is the position of CG situated, and sometimes they may even ask you to draw a diagram and show the position of CG. So I'll just show you in few cases, important cases. Don't give the answer in all the cases. The center of that body. Some students, they write that center of the triangle, center of the cone. That will become wrong. So you have to specifically mention there are certain points where we find the position of CG, where the CG is situated. They may even ask you to draw a diagram, show the position of CG in some particular type of bodies. So in that case, I'll just show you. Suppose we are having a rod like this. Where is the CG situated? Here. We'll show out here, center, midpoint of the rod. If we are having a disc like this, where is it situated? Here. Even in case of a sphere, it is over here, outside the sphere, means outside the body. This will be case of ring or a sphere. This will be case of ring or a sphere. Ring time we'll do like this, and a sphere we'll just keep it like this. And in case of cylinders will show like this. We'll draw a cylindrical body here like this, This is called axis of the cylinder, axis. Midpoint of the axis. If the cylinder is solid, it will be situated on the solid, on the body, and if it is hollow, it will be outside. But it will be like this. This is for cylindrical body, cylindrical body. If they ask you to draw, show the position of CG, so CG is situated here. We can show CG here. Here we can add CG is situated here. We can add CG over here. Now, in case if we are having a body in the form of a triangle, triangle can be of any type of triangle, either right angle or equilateral or isosceles, or even it is scalene triangle. So, where the three medians meet, that point of intersection will be the position of CG for this triangular lamina. So, median means what? The line from the vertex bisecting the opposite side is called median. So, one median is over here, this line is median, another median will be here, another median will be somewhere here, like this. Here is the CG of the triangular body situated. That we have to draw the diagram and show. And in case of a cone, cone's heavier side is over here and the lighter side is here because this side is pointed. So, if it is a solid cone, it will be, this is called vertical height, this is height h, the entire height is h. It will be situated at a height h by 4, that means somewhere here. CG situated, this is for solid cone. And if the cone is hollow, so we will draw another diagram and show. If this is a hollow cone, it will be situated h by 3, slightly above this case, somewhere here, CG. We can mark, this is h by 4, here we can mark h by 3, this is for hollow cone. So, I forgot to mention about one of the other type of figure, that was parallelogram or a square lamina. So, rectangular lamina. Where is the position of CG situated? So, I did not mention in the table. So, please mention that also in the table, include it. And in case of a rectangular body like this, position of CG will be the point of intersection of its diagonals or their diagonals. So, one diagonal will be like this, another diagonal will be like this. Here is the position of CG situated. So, please mention, in case of a rectangular or a square or a parallelogram, the position of CG is the point of intersection of the diagonals. So, this also could be a case. So, last time I had done some problems on uniform meter rule, if you remember in the previous class. So, meter rule was like this. It was starting from 0 and ending at 100 centimeter. So, I say the weight of this ruler is 50 GF. Where will that be situated? So, that is the weight of this one. Where will that be situated? That will be situated, this shape is rectangular laminar shape. So, its position of CG will be somewhere where the two diagonals meet, so somewhat like this and like this. So, I think it will be coming exactly at 50 centimeter mark. So, here it will be situated. This point will be the position of CG. This point will be the position of CG. So, that will be exactly at 50 centimeter mark. So, I will be showing the weight of this entire body or entire uniform rule, that was 50 GF at 50 centimeter mark I will show. So, that is what I did in the previous problems, and that time I told you just learn it and then I will be mentioning later. Now, I am mentioning it. So, this is the position of CG for a uniform meter rule. And so, you will be keeping, that means you will be showing the weight of 50 GF at this centimeter mark, at 50 centimeter mark, at the midpoint normally. If the body is uniform everywhere, so it will be exactly midway. If some part is heavier and another side is lighter, then the position of CG will be towards the heavier side. So, where the heavier, more particles are situated, it will be towards that side. So, hope this topic is clear, center of gravity. Now, we are into the last topic of this chapter, which is called circular motion, uniform circular motion. Uniform circular motion. In short, we call it UCM. Full form is uniform circular motion. Uniform is constant. When a body moves with a constant speed in a circular path or along a circular path, such a motion is said to be uniform circular motion. In such motion, speed remains constant throughout, like this. The body is moving in a circular path with the constant speed. Speed value will be same everywhere. At this point, maybe at this point, at all points, speed value does not change. Say, for example, the speed is 10 meters per second. That will remain same everywhere, here, and everywhere. At all the points, the speed value is the same throughout. Such a motion is called uniform circular motion. But one important aspect of this motion is, in such motion, we will find that the direction of motion of the body at every point keeps on changing. You will find direction in case of circular motion is given by the tangent drawn at that particular point. So, suppose the body is taking a circular path, in what direction I have considered anti-clockwise. So, it may be clockwise either. So, if the body is moving in anti-clockwise direction along a circular path, so at this point, what is the direction of velocity? We have to draw tangent. I think tangent is the point which touches the circumference only at one point. So, this line is the tangent. Tangent drawn in the direction of the motion. Here, what direction the tangent will come? Tangent will come like this. Here, the direction of tangent will come like this. Here, the direction of tangent will come like this. That means, out here the direction of motion will be like this. Here, the direction of motion will be like this. Here, the direction of motion will be like this. You have to draw tangent at that particular point. And that will keep changing because the direction is not the same throughout. Though the value is same, magnitude is same, that is value of velocity will remain the same at all the points v, everywhere the value of v is same throughout, but due to change in the direction, we say that the velocity changes throughout. Velocity is never constant, velocity is variable. Speed is constant, but the velocity is variable. Because velocity is vector, you have to consider the direction also. Vector has got both magnitude and direction. Magnitude is same, but the direction keeps on changing. That's why the velocity changes. So, it is very possible that the body is having a constant speed but variable velocity, and that happens in case of a uniform circular motion. And why the velocity is variable or why the velocity changes at every point? Because of the change in the direction of the motion of the body at every instant of its motion. So, the value is same, but the direction keeps changing. That's why it is going to have a variable velocity. And due to variable velocity, it will have acceleration, because we know the formula of acceleration. Acceleration formula is change in velocity by time. Change in velocity by time. Whenever there is change in velocity, that will produce an acceleration. And this acceleration will be produced by a force. Now, the question arises, what direction this acceleration be acting? What will be the direction for this acceleration? We will find that at every point that acceleration direction will be towards the center of the circle. That means direction of acceleration will be like this. At this point, direction of acceleration will be like this. At this point, direction of acceleration will be like this. At every point, acceleration will be directed towards the center of the circle. That means the direction of acceleration also changes. Direction of velocity changing, direction of acceleration is also changing. So, 1 year in ICC they had asked this question, when a body moves in a uniform circular motion, is the acceleration uniform or variable? So, the answer would be the acceleration is variable. Only speed is constant, whereas velocity is variable, acceleration is also variable, because the direction keeps changing. Here the direction is like this, here the direction is like this, here the direction is like this. Direction of the acceleration will keep on changing. And such an acceleration is given a particular name, and that is centripetal acceleration. Centripetal acceleration. Centripetal acceleration. Centripetal means the acceleration acting towards the center. Petal means towards, and centri means center. The acceleration is directed towards the center, so that's why it has got the name centripetal acceleration. So acceleration is also variable here. Now what produces acceleration? We say that a force produces acceleration. Because of force only there will be acceleration. And what will be the direction of force? The direction of force will be same as the direction of acceleration. Since acceleration is direction is towards the center, the force direction also will be towards the center. So such a force which acts towards the center of the circle to keep the body moving in a uniform circular motion is called centripetal force. Such a force is given a name centripetal force. Now the question may come, what is centripetal force? We say the force acting on a body towards the center of a circular path to keep it in uniform circular motion is called centripetal force. So you may get a question in ICC coming like this. What is the direction of velocity and what is the direction of force or the direction of acceleration when a body is moving in a circular path with a constant velocity, with a constant speed? The answer would be velocity will be along the tangent. We can use the word along the tangent, or we can use the term tangential. Tangential means along the tangent, tangent wise. We can call it tangent. The velocity is tangential, but the acceleration is towards the center along the radius. So this one is known as this direction is known as radial. Acceleration is radial, but velocity is tangential. Even the force is radial. Radial means along the radius towards the center, here. We can use the word either towards the center, or we can use the word radial. Radially inward. We can say radially inward. Tangential. Tangential means tangentially outward. So this would be the direction of acceleration and the direction of velocity. We have many examples of uniform circular motion in our daily life. The example, planets are revolving around the sun with the constant speed throughout, and that is the example of uniform circular motion. Satellites are revolving around the planet, is also example of uniform circular motion. We have examples, electrons revolving around the nucleus of an atom. Electrons are revolving continuously with a constant speed. So that is also example of uniform circular motion. We will have a piece of stone tied to a string. One end is tied to the string, and the other end we are holding and whirling it horizontally this way. This way you are whirling it, so the motion is taking place like this. What kind of motion is that? There is also uniform circular motion. So these are the examples of uniform circular. We got many examples in our daily life. Now one important question could be the difference between uniform circular motion and uniform translational motion. Translation means a straight line motion. What could be the main difference between them? We are taking the case of uniform translational. Translational means straight line motion. Translational motion and uniform circular motion. Uniform circular motion. Uniform translational motion, you will find that the bodies. What is uniform translational motion? We say that when the body moves with a constant speed in a straight line path, the body is moving in a straight line with a constant speed, then such a motion is called uniform translation motion. And when a body moves with a constant speed in a circular path, then we say that uniform circular motion. So in case of uniform translation motion, you will find the direction also does not change. Direction also remains the same. That's why in this case, both velocity and speed remain constant. And out here in this case, speed remains constant, but the velocity becomes variable, or velocity does not remain constant because of changing direction continuously at every point of its motion. So here we can write the first point, both speed and velocity are constant. That is the first point we are going to write over here in this case. And out there we will be writing speed remains constant, speed remains constant, but velocity becomes variable. That is the first point of major difference between these two. Another point of difference we can give, here you will find that acceleration is 0 because the velocity does not change, and formula of acceleration, as I told you, is A equal to V minus U by T. That means when the velocity are same, the velocity remains the same in uniform translation motion, initial, final, or any velocity at any instant of time will remain the same, so acceleration will be 0. So here we are writing an acceleration is 0. Here we write acceleration of the body is 0. Acceleration is 0. We will be writing. Or we can say that it is an non-accelerated motion. Uniform translation motion is non-accelerated. Non-accelerated means with no acceleration, means acceleration is 0. And out there we will be writing acceleration is unequal to 0. There is acceleration unequal to 0. Acceleration is there. It is an accelerated motion and it is non-accelerated motion. This two point of differences we must suggest. I think this is the question of year something I see 2016 they had asked this question. Give differences, major differences between uniform translation motion and uniform circular motion. We'll give two major differences. Now let us find the definition of centripetal force. What is centripetal force? Centri means center and petal means towards. We say that when a body moves in a circular path with a constant speed, it experiences a force towards the center of the circle. That force is known as centripetal force. In other words, we can say it is the force acting on a body towards the center of the circular path. When it is in uniform circular motion, that force is known as centripetal force. Let us find, I gave you many examples of uniform circular motion. Let us check in those circular motion what provides or what gives the necessary centripetal force. Planets are revolving around the sun and the motion is UCM or uniform circular motion. So what will provide the necessary centripetal force? That time we say gravitational force between sun and the planet. Centripetal force is provided by a gravitational force between sun and the planet to keep the planet in UCM, uniform circular motion. The question may come like this: what provides the necessary centripetal force for the planets revolving around the sun? The answer would be the gravitational force between sun and the planet. That would be this will be the answer for this question. Now, second case, electrons are revolving around the nucleus. What provides? Then we say electrostatic force. Electrostatic force between protons and electrons, between protons and electron provides the necessary centripetal force. This could be the answer. This could be the answer. Electrostatic force between the protons and electrons provides the necessary centripetal force. Let us take another case. A stone tied to one end of the string, long string, and whirled to describe a horizontal circle. So, what provides the centripetal force in that case? There we say tension in the string. Tension in the string provides the necessary centripetal force. This would be the answer for this. Some vehicles are taking turn like this or negotiating a curved track, or railway tracks are curved. So what provides the necessary centripetal force in that case? There we say friction. Friction, if it is the case of a car and all, we say friction between the road and the tires, and if it is the case of a train, we say friction between the wheel and the track. Friction between road and tires in case of a vehicle, tires, provides the necessary centripetal force. So, question may come, what provides centripetal force in the following cases? We say that in case of satellites revolving around the planet, what provides the centripetal force? There again we say gravitational force provides the necessary centripetal force. So, students, hope you understood till this much. Now, only little bit is left over in this chapter, so that we will complete in the next class, and then we start a new chapter as well that particular day, and that will be work, power and energy, the new chapter. Thank you very much.